Hi, good evening, and thank you so much for showing up. Hi, Janisha. Hi, Anne. Hi, Sheldon. Who else is on? I'm seeing a number of you coming on. So, we have an interesting program lined up this afternoon. Dolores, Dorothy, Juanita, Maria. I would have just done the AV test, the audiovisual test with Senator Browne, and he's going to come back into the studio in a little bit, and then we will get started. But today was a hell of a day. Mass vaccination rollout, first come, first serve, and boy, whew, the jackassing of the scene. But on Friday, we will talk about that a little bit more. I don't want to use today to talk about that. Today, we're going to be talking about far more diplomatic issues. And let me not waste time bringing my guest on screen, because he's sitting there waiting patiently and probably has lots of important things to go and do with the rest of his evening. Probably has a crisis or a fire or two to put out. So here we go. Dr. Amery Browne, hi, good evening. Thank you so much for agreeing to spend
Hello,
to spend Wednesday evening with us. I know it can't be easy. You all have all of these sit-ins taking place, and then of course your ministry these days has a lot going on. Tons and tons and tons of things going on. So thanks for the time.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you and your audience.
Yeah.
And I don't regard this as taking time from my duties, but part of the role of being a servant of the public is ensuring that you are as accessible as possible and interacting using established and newer channels to interact, to connect, and to exchange views. So this is very much part and parcel of what I see as the role of servant of the public. So thank you for the opportunity.
No problem. I mean, you've had a very varied career. I remember you are a doctor, medical doctor, not so?
Yes, I am.
I know that's what your qualifications are.
It's been a while.
It's been a while, but medical. I know you're a medical doctor. Then you would have gone into life as an elected politician, then spent some time as a diplomat out in Latin America,
Yes.
and now you're back, but not just as a diplomat, as the person who's driving a lot of policy for diplomats, for our diplomats. So if you could give me a sense of what it was like being a diplomat out in Latin America.
Well, it's been, as you've referenced, quite a journey for me. And there are times when I would have made a change, a move, a step on my trajectory. And sometimes you'd wonder, is this the right thing for me? Certainly the jump from medicine to management when I became the technical director of the National AIDS Coordinating Committee. That was a huge shift because I wasn't able to spend time with my patients. I had focused largely on HIV and sexually transmitted infections. I was doing a lot of work there for quite a number of years. So that was a big leap. And then, as you've referenced, a few of the other shifts into electoral politics, then into my role as head of mission at our embassy in Brasilia, with responsibility for several other countries in the Southern Cone, and then now back into another cabinet role. Again, looking back, I have a sense that everything I've done has helped and is contributing to whatever value I am able to bring to my current duties. So that's something I would encourage everyone to do on their own journey, just to draw on the past, utilize the experiences, good and bad, the exposures, the examples that you would have been exposed to, and do one's best to bring that to bear on the service that you're called upon to provide. So you asked about Brazil. That was quite an experience. During my time there with my family.
How long were you in Brazil? I've forgotten.
Just over 4 years.
Right.
Yeah. So the children basically grew up there, my first two. And then the third child is Brazilian. She was born in Brazil, so she's a dual citizen. And so that was quite interesting because the country of Brazil has changed dramatically during that period, and I would still describe it as very much in transition. And transition involves some pain. COVID-19 has just added to all of the convulsions that Brazilian society, and it covers everything from economics, race relations, relations with the rest of the world, determining the political philosophy that would guide the country, dramatic shifts, and of course the heavy cloud of corruption that unfortunately has affected Brazilian society far more than most, and that the judiciary and various arms of the state have been working against and trying to resolve over time. So very much it was a country.
It sounds like you're describing
transition.
Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah,
that's how it feels.
It feels that way. Trinidad, there's something special about us where much of our outreach into the world is to look for negative comparisons. So we're good at that. And we've seen that even with COVID-19, where people have developed a view, some people, that we have it the worst here, when absolutely that is not the case. And we look at countries that are opening back up now and saying, well, why aren't we? But the fact of the matter is we have lagged behind in a good way, in that our first case came well after many other countries. Our first wave or surge came well after many other countries. And even this period of emergency and lockdown, when you look at the duration, it's far shorter thus far than many countries. Some businesses in Canada and other parts of the world have been closed for over a year. And therefore, this is not to paint a rosy picture of what's happening in our country, because there's real pain and genuine lessons to be learned. But at the same time, I always tend to lean against the view that it's the worst here, we have it the worst. But anyway, I went off on a little bit of a tangent in terms of the Brazil experience. What really capped it off was, well, I think the introduction when we went there. You'd recall there was a meat scandal.
Yes.
Where, again, corruption affects everything. Where there were perceptions that the public health inspectorate related to the Brazil's powerful meat industry had resulted in serious concerns about the safety of their products. And we had banned corned beef, which is like a national dish.
Staple.
Would you believe?
It's a staple here.
Yeah. Would you believe it's no big deal in Brazil?
Really?
The majority of Brazilians that I speak to have no time with corned beef. You don't find it well stocked in supermarkets, but it's a big export item, and I know where a lot of it goes to, right here in TNT. Anyway, so that very early on, I had to treat with that and work with the Ministry of Agriculture here and other stakeholders in understanding what was taking place and normalizing, because it had the potential to affect relations between countries like ourselves and Brazil. So that was the start. And then right at the end, there was COVID-19, which has decimated that country to an extent that few people recognize or acknowledge. I wouldn't get into some of the really tough details, but even the diplomatic corps has been hit very hard in the city of Brasilia, as it has in other capitals in South America. So, and leaving Brazil during what was, well, we thought at the time was the peak of the epidemic, it did get even worse subsequently, was a logistical challenge. So I do empathize with our nationals and other people who have had challenges and to an extent are still having challenges moving, whether it's for whatever purpose, moving around the world, moving to Trinidad or out of Trinidad. There are challenges which I myself faced with my own, with my family, and I never forget the experience in Sao Paulo airport, which is that city had at the time one of the highest prevalence rates in the world. And so, you have to be very careful in exposure. And we had taken a hotel room with the family because it was several hours layover. And I said, listen, I'm going to take a little walk through the airport to get something to eat for y'all at one of the little fast food restaurants. And I was walking through the airport and I realized a lot of people are looking at me a little strangely. And it's only after about 15 minutes of walking, I looked in a mirror while walking and I realized I'd forgotten to put my mask on. And so this is like the most dangerous airport for COVID at the time. Anyway, and so I had to make my way back. I literally ran back to the room, took my buff from Sarah, put my mask on and then go. But it's just to show that, there's so many challenges along the way, and it's how we respond to those challenges. We recognize when we need an intervention or assistance, and we respond. I could draw many parallels based on that little example. But
so that layover in Sao Paulo, that would have been when you were on your way back home?
Yes, indeed.
I saw there was a post that Sarah put up, and she was talking about having to pack up and 4 years of life in 12 suitcases, and you're all, getting back here and having to, you would have had to be in quarantine for a bit, as is protocol, and then you're back and you are now here functioning. How has that sojourn, that 4 years as a diplomat, as an ambassador on the front lines, how is that feeding into the work that you're currently doing at the ministry? In what ways has it prepared you for the job that you're doing?
That's a good question. In several ways, I would say. One, I would say the time away from Trinidad and Tobago has helped broaden my worldview, provided some additional maturity, some additional perspective. The network that one is exposed to. Brasilia is a very special city. In some ways, it's very much a diplomatic city. And the diplomatic corps there, the number of embassies present, is second only maybe to Washington, D.C. and one or two others. It really is a powerhouse in terms of diplomatic corps and the network one is able to establish. And that has served me in good stead, because a number of the fellow ambassadors I would have served with in that city are now ministers of foreign affairs. Some of them are posted in other capitals, and there's a maintenance of communication, which is very useful, I would just say, as a current Minister of Foreign and Caricom Affairs. The other thing is that it's certainly very much part of Trinidad and Tobago's vision to connect more with the Southern Cone, with Latin America, and my time there has really helped me to understand and appreciate the culture in that part of the world a lot better. And those connections, the ease of communication, of understanding, of establishing a rapport at this stage in this current position has been very much facilitated by my time there. And the other bit I would add to the response to your question is serving as a head of mission helps me greatly now to assist our missions that depend on us at headquarters for facilitation, for guidance, for support, for adjustment when such is required. That experience has helped greatly, as opposed to if I were a Minister of Foreign Affairs not having been at the other end of that spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And then it has also helped me to relate to ambassadors of other countries
Right.
that are posted here in Trinidad and Tobago, and I would say ambassadors and high commissioners,
Right.
heads of mission here, because it's a wide spectrum, and
Yes.
different countries
Pretty
have
wide.
different foreign policy inclinations, different cultures. Some are a lot more aggressive in their diplomacy. Others are very much laid back, and therefore one has to be flexible. One has to understand where an individual and a diplomatic team might be coming from, and always try to broker and negotiate in a way that doesn't inflame tensions, but produces results. That's always the objective.
Did you think diplomacy would have been a good fit for you? Because like we started talking about, you were a doctor before, then you became a government minister, elected politician. Did it ever occur to you that being a diplomat is something that would have been a good fit for you?
I can't say that it did. Now looking back, I do think there may be some alignment with my personality, my own inclinations as a human being. I tend, though I've gotten into a skirmish or two in my time, I tend to be one that would prefer a dialogue, a more peaceful outcome, to broker a win-win that I would say can be seen as generally characterizing my personality. So in that sense, it is a fit. I believe in the power of positive communication. There are lots of negative things I could spill or say, but I have been mentored and I've been sort of trained to always try to focus on the positive. That's where our energies can be maximized. And if we're in the business of helping people and helping the country, which we are, we'd want to spend our energy wisely. So that's why I don't always follow the chatter from the other side of the aisle and the sniping and so on. There are things that need to be responded to, but generally I've found if you focus on your duties and apply yourself with the most noble intentions, generally you get the right results, and I've tried to do that.
All right. Well, let's test your diplomatic skills and your communication and your openness to communication. I have a bunch of questions here. I was actually pretty surprised at how many questions and the range of questions that I got. But let's get into it. And no particular order, right? So, vaccines, because that's the pressing thing on everybody's minds these days, and that's the first question I have on the page here. The United States has indicated that it's going to be giving a certain number of vaccines. It's going to be donating a certain number of vaccines. At one point, I think I heard 60 million AstraZeneca vaccines.
Yes.
Right.
It's gone up to 80
right.
now.
I saw. Right. That's it.
And even further. Yeah.
Right. I know I saw another number today, and I was like, "Ooh, this number keeps changing." But the first number I heard was 60 million. Do we have any indication of how many vaccines are going to be allocated to the Caribbean specifically? I'm not going to even ask for Trinidad and Tobago, but for the Caribbean specifically?
Oh, okay. And the answer would not always be an immediate leap to yes or no. What I can tell you is, first of all, we have welcomed, as a country and as Caricom, we have welcomed this U.S. global initiative on vaccine access. It certainly would have been welcomed much earlier in the trajectory of the pandemic, but it's never too late to do the right thing, and the Biden administration is certainly doing the right thing in advancing this initiative. It has come on the heels of some consistent advocacy by our Prime Minister, the Prime Minister of this little country, as well as a number of other leaders of developing countries, of international organizations like the WHO. And therefore, it is my hope and our hope that the Biden initiative will send a signal to other capitals, some of which have done things and red listed and, now in a position of greater comfort. And some of them, when you weigh them in the balance, may not have contributed a single vial of vaccine to the developing world, except through COVAX, which we all acknowledge has not come through in the manner in which it was envisioned thus far.
Yeah.
So this initiative is welcome. It has been an intensive journey of diplomacy in, first of all, achieving some of the things we've achieved, and also in fleshing out the details of the U.S. initiative. What I can tell you, Rhoda, is that this is an active matter, as in today there were meetings of significance between CARFA and the White House. Earlier this week, there were meetings between this Minister of Foreign and Caricom Affairs and a special advisor to President Biden. There have been meetings between the Prime Minister of our country, who's the chair of Caricom, and a host of U.S. leadership figures, all pressing for the right kind of details, to shape the details in our favor. What I can say at this point is we do not have a confirmed total that I can share with the public. It is most likely that that particular announcement would be made by the Prime Minister in conjunction with the U.S. Embassy when that detail has been finalized. What I've been working with CARFA on doing is refining a CARICOM request. In other words, you've announced 80 million by the end of June, 80 million doses, which is a very, very ambitious target, logistically, to get these vaccines across the world. We have advanced a very clear CARICOM position as to how many of those doses are urgently required. We've also advanced, and I want to salute the Executive Director of CARFA, Dr. Joy St. John. We've also advanced a formula and provided that to the Biden administration to assist them in understanding how the ratio should be broken down.
Because I was going to ask that, if we've gotten to the point of discussing ratios and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. All of that has been finalized and conveyed to the White House. So we've hopefully made their task a little bit easier in weighing the size of populations, weighing the current status of the infections in the various countries. A special measure has been devised to capture the last 2 weeks, a snapshot of the last 2 weeks in each member state, and that is introduced and weighed into the formula. So a lot of the technical work has been completed. It is my anticipation. I hate to put dates on these things because it's outside of our control, but it is my anticipation that within the next week or so, there may be some further announcements. So it's a sort of long-winded answer, but it has allowed me to explain a little bit of what is happening. And it's not just a case of, all right, how much we're getting. It's a work in progress. The good news is that it has been confirmed that CARICOM, Trinidad and Tobago CARICOM, has been identified as a priority within this initiative, and we will be receiving an allocation of that will assist our national response to COVID-19. If you listen to the Prime Minister closely, you'd recognize that we are not completely dependent on that donation, but have been doing a lot of other work to ensure that both through donated vaccines from elsewhere, within and outside of the region, and also via placing the purchase orders that the market has allowed us to place, the population will be provided with, and is being provided with, approved vaccines in large and growing numbers.
Yeah. I've noticed,
To
though,
help keep us
certainly
safe.
from the last two recent press conferences, that he has indicated purchases, right? And so Sinopharm purchases, AstraZeneca purchases, and most recently the Johnson & Johnson purchases.
Yes,
So it seems to
yes.
me as if we are in train now, after having gone through a long period of time of being reliant on donations, vaccine donations. We are now finally in a position where purchasing can actually take place.
That's a very good observation. And so these donations and the diplomatic work that was done to achieve and bring to fruition those donations really provided a bit of a stopgap. It also provided an introduction of the vaccines to the population, a test of our systems, and you see that testing continues, but a test of the manpower, the primary healthcare infrastructure, the cold chain mechanism. It's really allowed Trinidad and Tobago to get ready for the heavy lifting which has begun and which will continue, which is how do you get hundreds of thousands of doses as quickly as possible into the arms of people who need it most on a voluntary basis. And I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of some of the controversies that we are seeing, but what I would say is that my respect for the public health professionals of this country, or epidemiologists, or principal medical officers, or chief medical officer, and I mean, they're the glamorous top, the ground level has only grown day by day. And it's always been said we have to listen to the science, listen to the technical people. I think we're all learning that is what will see us through in the end. And I just want to salute them for the work that they have been doing at the Ministry of Foreign and Caricom Affairs. Our team has been working hard as well, but it's with a different level of pressure. And I want to salute our healthcare providers.
Dr. Browne, what kind of work is required to get 100,000 vaccines from China to Trinidad and Tobago? Give me a sense of you. I mean, you don't have to go through every single detail, but give me a sense of how the negotiations work to get something like that to happen.
Well, it began, I would say, with some informal discussions. Those discussions would have involved the minister in the office of the Prime Minister, Stuart Young, the Honorable Stuart Young, MP. It would have involved myself and the very young and dynamic ambassador of China in Port of Spain. And from early on, I would want to spend a moment on that ambassador. He took the time to understand the dynamic here in Trinidad and Tobago and in the region, and was very much leaning forward toward us as opposed to leaning away from us. So once you have that kind of interface, it makes it very easy. The idea emerged that we can arrange a meeting of leaders, obviously not a physical meeting given the challenges, but a virtual meeting. And that was set up in record time. It involved a number of visits by the ambassador of China to my office. It involved literally hundreds of emails, WhatsApp exchanges, a brokering of time, date shifting, selection of platform, identification of interpreters, a lot of fine details to allow that to happen. And then to structure the conversations. When you two heads of government meet, it's not just a chit-chat. there's some pre-structuring, and so the conversation can occur in a logical manner and in a way that will achieve an outcome that sometimes is mutually agreed in advance. Anyway, so that's just a little sense of how that occurred. Now, after the two heads met, during that meeting, a consensus was established that once the Chinese vaccines have been approved by the WHO, Trinidad and Tobago would be offered a grant of vaccines and also the opportunity to purchase. And from the moment the approval was granted, I was on the phone with the ambassador of China, literally, the moment on the phone. Let's go, let's get cracking. His enthusiasm matched our enthusiasm, and then it got into the logistics, a lot of which was managed by the Chinese side and our team in Beijing, which sometimes we don't talk about enough. Our overseas missions have helped a lot in these, and it's not just with the Chinese, with the other interfaces, with the Indian example, as well as with some of the more regional contributions that we've received. So I don't know if I've given you.
Yes, you have.
Yeah. So there's a lot that's involved. There's an exchange of diplomatic notes, notes verbal. There were exchanges of correspondence as well following the meeting. You have letters from one head of government to the next. You have letters from the Minister of Foreign Affairs to the next. And then after the vaccines when the vaccines are en route, there's constant communication. There was a weather delay coming out of Beijing, which threw everything off.
Yeah.
I had anticipated going to the airport with the ambassador of China and the Minister of Health at 10:30 p.m. to receive the vaccines, because there's a certain formality that helps convey gratitude.
Yes.
It's not just a plane lands and you throw it into a container. You're supposed to receive it with a certain degree of diplomatic formality. That was all scheduled. The flights got knocked off. Everything changed. The arrival time was shifted to almost 2 a.m. And therefore, one had to be just in constant communication. And going back to where we started, once the objective is positive and noble, and there's an agreed outcome that's being pursued, that makes it very easy, particularly when you're dealing with people who understand the urgency of the need. This is not a luxury item. We're not bringing perfume to stock in the mall. This is life and death. And that degree of urgency has assisted in making some of these initiatives successful thus far.
So then what do you do in a situation where there is less mutuality, less reciprocity? You might be excited about getting something done, but the other side, who has what you require, is not as excited about getting the thing done. How do you go about negotiating situations like that?
Well, those situations do arise, and the key there is to try never to personalize an interaction. My work is not about Amery Browne. It's about a ministry, which is a much bigger team, and about a country, which is all of us, which is you, Rhoda, and everyone listening now. So it helps when you step back from the person and look at the mission. When dealing with a difficult challenge or a diplomat who may not see an initiative in the same way as we would like, or in a manner that we would like, it always helps to identify agents of progress, which may not be your immediate counterpart in the capital. It might be another diplomat at the mission who has a different energy. It might be a minister in the cabinet of the country that you are seeking to work with. It might be better to use, because remember, you have options. You have the team of the foreign country that is posted in Port of Spain, but you also have a team very often in their part of the world.
Yes.
So depending on how you read the situation, there are ways that you can balance the communication accordingly, lean in a slightly different direction, all with a view to achieving results. And of course, you learn as you go. You get lots of surprises sometimes. There have been some awkward situations. Some of them have, occurred somewhat in the public gaze. But even when that occurs, that's when you draw on the best attributes of your team and yourself. There are times when you have to do a lot of soothing and damage repair behind the scenes, all aimed at getting a particular outcome on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Cuba, our relationship with Cuba and the fact that they are developing a vaccine right now. Are we in any discussions with them, or in any negotiations with them with respect to vaccines and that they're developing at this point?
Well, the answer is yes. First of all, the relationship between Trinidad and Tobago and between Caricom and Cuba is an extraordinarily successful and warm relationship. Caricom, and this is one of the good lessons I've learned from Dr. Rowley very early on in a conversation. He reminded me, he emphasized to me that when you stand on principle, even in an issue of controversy, in the long run, those principles will see you through. So with respect to Cuba, CARICOM and this country have not shifted with the wind. We have not shifted with the vagaries of administrative changes of administration in other parts of the world, but have really held to a line of principle, where we have been consistently calling for an avoidance of the denigration of the Cuban people, their way of life, calling for a recognition of the value that Cuba has brought to our region and the hemisphere. We have called for a climbing down from a position of sanctions against the Cuban people, and several other positions. You saw the issue where Cuba was listed as a state sponsor of terrorism, which, no evidence really was presented. And again, this country and CARICOM have maintained a position of principle in this regard.
Does that raise any concerns or tensions for you? Because the United States is the country that has the trade embargo and the embargo against Cuba. We have a diplomatic relationship with the United States. We have a diplomatic relationship with Cuba. Do you ever find yourself having to navigate very, very fine lines between the needs and requests of both countries?
Well, the United States is a sovereign country, and they have a right to their foreign policy, which we respect. They're also a superpower, which is recognized as such. But though we may be small at the level of the United Nations and at the global level, we are also sovereign, and therefore we would exercise our voice where we see it as strategic or useful or instrumental. What we found with the relationship with the United States, it's a long-standing relationship. And definitely, it was one of my objectives coming into office, and maybe this is the first time I'm stating it, to stabilize and improve and build on our relations with Washington, D.C. It's been very fortuitous that with the change in the U.S. administration, even the embassy here, the U.S. embassy here in Port of Spain, I have found the interactions to be so fruitful, so dynamic, so engaging, that it has made the fulfillment of the objective I just mentioned to you much easier. Added to that, our excellent team in Washington, D.C. has been pursuing that same course, and it has resulted in some fruit in that Trinidad and Tobago has been able to convey Caricom's voice to the very highest levels of the current U.S. administration. And some of the, you'd recall, unfortunate comments that were made by a former ambassador at a particular forum, really unfortunate. I'll leave that word hanging.
He has a pen pal. The former ambassador has a pen pal in the opposition. I remember.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. You'd remember that caused a little furor, but all of that has been dissipated by the good energy being exerted from the Office of the Prime Minister, from my ministry, from the Embassy of the United States of America, and the Caricom Secretariat, etc. I don't want to dwell on what happened with that former ambassador, but the current status is an extremely
so things have improved between last since the change of administration, and I'm not talking about our change of administration. Since the change of administration with the United States, you've seen an improvement in relations?
Definitely. And the engagement now, and it's not just with the Ministry of Foreign and Caricom Affairs, it's across so many sectors, is extremely dynamic to an extent that I feel a sense of traction. I feel that the objective of ensuring that key relationship with our largest trading partner is heading in the right direction. Of course, there will be hurdles along the way. There are challenges in this region. There are challenges sometimes. You saw what happened with the opposition, where they basically got into a tit for tat with a foreign mission here in Port of Spain. And those types of things will happen, especially when political zeal interferes with the proper diplomatic order. Those types of things will happen. And again, you draw on the team of experienced diplomats and committed people that we have to calm the waters and ensure that the interests of Trinidad and Tobago are always well served.
Is diplomacy here ever disturbed by or impacted on by social media posts? Because social media social media has an impact on pretty much everything right now.
That's a question and a half.
Right.
True.
I put up a post and it could easily become a story. That happened to me during the general elections last year. I put up one post, basically saying I felt like driving past where they were counting up the ballots and shouting love in the house. Right? That's what it became a story. On page 3 of the Express, which kind of stunned me because page 3 is, prime real estate for news stories. And I just thought, but how does my social media post become that? So I'm wondering, does social media posting, social media commentary, does it have an impact on diplomacy?
Well, I would say yes, it does. Because I could give a number of examples, but let me start with one. Do you remember something called the FSO Nabarima?
Yes. That was the vessel that was listing.
Listen, if you rely on social media, it wasn't listing. It was sinking. There was a post, I still have it on my phone, that a screenshot from an authority that said one bright and early one morning, sinking of Nabarima confirmed. And that caused a storm in this country. And you had, people holding their heads and, the Gulf of Paria, what's going to happen to the mangrove. And I wouldn't look with negativity at the responses, because those responses were based on a genuine concern. But the concern was triggered when you drill down to the core of it by some misinformation that was introduced to the social space and took on a life of its own. It's good to know that we have a society that is concerned about the environment, and it's my hope and aspiration that concern will be manifest more on a daily basis, as opposed to a crisis management kind of mobilization of the public on a daily basis in how we treat with the environment and littering and pollution. But that's a whole different channel. The reason I went into that example is that was a clear case of social media and an issue that achieved a certain prominence on social media finding its way into, you recall,
it's misinformation. It's misinformation. You are being very diplomatic, very diplomatic with what you're saying, but it's misinformation, and it's misinformation with a significant amount of malintent. You don't have to say it. I can say
it. Rhoda, what do you do? In that case, it was a matter of, well, you'd recall I had to call in the ambassador of Venezuela to the ministry, which is a sharp action, and he came in with hands almost waving in the air.
Didn't that team of person eventually have to go to the Nabarima to be able to ascertain what was going on?
Inspectors, including our Coast Guard, boarded the vessel, did a tour of the vessel, presented reports. There were many other eyes, I would say, outside of TNT and technology that was mobilized to develop a better understanding of what was going on and what was the threat. To the credit of the Venezuelan authorities, eventually a lot of information was provided to us, and including the ultimate response of offloading the fuel cargo from the vessel. Anyway, that is an example of social media impacting diplomatic activity, absorbing the energy of a sector. Caricom's energy was also directed to a certain extent by that particular issue. So, not to dwell too much on the goodly Nabarima, but as an example that social media does impact this whole thing about vaccines. There's been a bit of a campaign around, there have been attempts to denigrate the Sinopharm vaccine and some other vaccines. Some of that is fueled by misinformation. Some of that is fueled by what I would describe as just genuine concern by some members of the public, and then some of it is fueled by global marketing and the global chess game between powerful countries that, across this precious planet of ours. So in treating with that, especially when we are offering this vaccine on a voluntary basis to our public, that's another area in which the social media congress and exchange and dialogue does find its way into the decisions that we have to make, does find its way into the kind of communication that we have to engage in. And that communication is with the public as well as with some of the diplomats themselves. Just to try to say that, we're on track with this initiative. The general acceptance, as you know, has been extremely good, and we press ahead. while addressing those concerns that are brought to the fore.
As we're talking about the Nabarima and territorial waters in Venezuela, has the issue of Juan Guaido's representation at the OAS, has that been resolved? What's the update with that?
Well, the answer is no, it has not been resolved. The OAS continues to seat a representative of Juan Guaido, which certainly is not in keeping with the reality that the nation of Venezuela withdrew in full from the Organization of American States. So you have that anomaly which continues. Trinidad and Tobago continues, along with our Caricom brothers and sisters, to participate very productively, as far as we can, with the organs and processes of the OAS, recognizing its importance to issues affecting the hemisphere. But the specific answer to the question is yes, even though Mr. Guaido no longer heads the National Assembly in Caracas, his representative continues to sit at the Organization of American States.
I have one more vaccine question for you. I mean, I know we switched to Venezuela, now I want to switch back to vaccines. Are you aware of there being any particular vaccine that might prevent persons from being able to travel?
No. Of course, we are monitoring the exchanges, monitoring the announcements and pronouncements from the various capitals very closely. What I can say is there have been suggestions that particular brands and sources of vaccines might affect the freedom of movement in the near or distant future. Some of that, and I'm offering at this stage, I want to say it clearly, my own personal view, that some of that is just an attempt to shape the market and maybe to guide people in a particular direction.
It might be linked to trade. It might be linked to trade, which is why I asked the question. Because I'm thinking...
that might be possible.
I'm thinking we know that there are vaccines that are WHO approved, but there are also vaccines that are not WHO approved. So I was just wondering if at all, one example would be the Russian, oh my goodness. Sputnik, that's it. I was trying to remember the name of the shuttle,
yes,
right?
sure.
Right. So I know that Sputnik is not WHO approved, or at least the last bit of information I had is that Sputnik was not WHO approved. The vaccine that the Cubans are working on right now, that is not yet, it's not in the finishing stages, and we don't know if it's WHO approved or whatever. So if a vaccine was not WHO approved, if that was likely to have an impact, that's where I was heading with that question.
Well, you put it into that context. It is a reminder of the very sound principle. Go back to the term
Prime
principle,
Minister.
the very sound principle of our Prime Minister, and we've maintained that we are only offering vaccines on a voluntary basis to our public that have been emergency use listed by the World Health Organization. And so even those that we may have been offered through our diplomatic channels, we've only utilized those vaccines and offered them to the public upon approval by the World Health Organization. I just want to switch back quickly to Cuba because you just reminded me quietly that I didn't fully answer the question about progress or connection to the future of the Cuban vaccine. The relationship I started saying is excellent between Havana and Port of Spain. We are following the progress of their vaccines, and they have a number of promising vaccines in development. We're following the progress very closely. It got to the extent that I, in close collaboration with the Cuban ambassador posted here, have even offered the potential for our universities, particularly the University of the West Indies in St. Augustine, to collaborate with the final stages of development. There may be ways that we could assist because the vaccine is very promising. It is not yet at this stage of EUL listing. I don't think it's very close, but certainly with respect to the final phases of clinical trials, things seem to be going well. So the specific question was whether Trinidad and Tobago is well positioned to benefit from that vaccine when it is approved. The answer is an emphatic yes. We are, and that connection is being maintained on a regular basis. There's some heads of mission that I have on my cell phone, and I make use of their contacts frequently. None of those are by accident, and it's really all to help ensure that we maintain the key relationships that will assist this country today, tomorrow, and into the future.
When are embassies here, so from other countries that are here, so people that we are hosting, when are they likely to be back up and running and for human traffic?
Well, that the answer to that falls into the bigger picture of the normalization of the social life and economic life in Trinidad and Tobago, all of which is contingent on progress with the new infections, progress with mortality. There have been some early signals that the worst with respect to this wave may be behind us. I'm always very cautious with premature celebration in these matters because the reality is we're still losing citizens to this horrific disease, and people are still finding themselves being infected, notwithstanding the restrictions. So it's a work in progress. With respect to the activities of various embassies here in Port-of-Spain, my awareness is that the diplomatic corps remains quite active and engaged. There's a new dean of the diplomatic corps, the ambassador of France, very dynamic individual, who's taken over from the ambassador of the Dominican Republic. So he's the senior most diplomat stationed in our capital, and therefore he assumes the position of dean. And so through communication with him, we have identified that the diplomatic corps remains highly active. We have shifted a lot of our interactions with missions to virtual interactions. This week gone, I've had meetings with the ambassador of Mexico, the ambassador of Argentina. A lot of this work is focused on, of course, vaccine acquisition, because there's another Latin American vaccine in production, and that probably would be the basis of another conversation, maybe in the near future.
Okay.
But there's some exciting prospects.
Who's working on this other Latin American vaccine?
This is a consortium between Mexico and Argentina. Fortunately, with both of those capitals, our relationship is extremely good. And to the extent that right after I met with the ambassador of Argentina, literally the next day, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Argentina, who has a lot on his plate, was in a virtual meeting with me as a follow-up. And again, this is another case of a foreign entity leaning not away or neutrally, but leaning toward Trinidad and Tobago and leaning toward Caricom. Listen, we recognize you're facing the same challenges that we are. You have a really small market size, which puts you at a huge disadvantage. And when it comes to vaccine purchasing, we would like to collaborate with you. We would like to assist. And this vaccine that we're developing, let us explore ways in which Trinidad and Tobago and the region in which you are located can benefit. So I may have lost the the original thread of the
Embassies
question.
here that remain closed to nationals.
Right. So some of the embassies are closed physically, just as we have had to do the same in a number of capitals. But in all cases, as far as I'm aware, there's the opportunity via email, via other means of communication for individuals to access services and to achieve the desired communication and outcomes. I think you had mentioned the Embassy of China.
China and the United States.
They're both very much open for business, not physically,
Right.
but in terms of what I could say is that the diplomatic corps has been identified as exempted from the state of emergency provisions. So they are considered permitted to operate, but physically, the determination has been made by the vast majority that it would be better and also a contribution to our national effort if they allow their staff to work from home and help reduce the potential for transmission in Port-of-Spain, along with the other efforts. When will they reopen physically? Hopefully sooner rather than later.
I guess it will depend on policy from the Prime Minister, I would imagine.
And results from us, the citizens of the country.
Gotcha.
It depends on that.
Our missions in other parts of the world, are they staffed? Adequately staffed? Can you give us an update on the various missions?
Yeah, they are staffed. 20 missions across the globe are staffed, adequately staffed. I would wish
Fully
to say
staffed?
yes. Optimally staffed? Absolutely not.
Okay.
So we are engaged in a review of our overseas footprint at this time. A number of countries have already made decisions in terms of closing certain missions, opening additional missions. What I could say in that regard is we are doing a review exercise that's ongoing. We are also collaborating with Barbados and several of our other neighbors on the potential for shared representation in a number of far-flung areas of the globe. There are real economies of scale and savings that can accrue to that type of approach. That's one of the priorities of Prime Minister Rowley, and it's something that we are pursuing at this time actively. There are missions abroad that have reopened fully and then had to close again as new waves of infection have hit the cities in which they are located. But generally speaking, we have trained staff in all of the missions. Some of them require some additional attention, and that is being mobilized through the review that we are currently conducting. I wish it were a case where we could just, recruit people and ensure that we harvest our best and brightest, because that is what we really need. But again, we are constrained by the Public Service Commission and all of the structures that, on one hand, protect our systems from arbitrary nepotism and, just bringing up a bunch of friends, but on the other hand, result in inordinate delays in filling positions and a slow pace of making changes where those changes are required. And if we have representatives overseas or at headquarters who are not productive, who do not have the right type of interface with the public or the clients that they're positioned to serve, it's incumbent on us to measure that and make changes as appropriate. So the review is ongoing, and we are staffed. I would not describe it as optimal staffing levels at this time.
Gotcha.
Our people are stretched very much so.
Gotcha. Now I want to focus on the Caricom aspect of your portfolio, because it's really under this government, and I don't mean this most recent government, from 2015 to now, that the post has been renamed Foreign and Caricom Affairs. So we've been hearing continuously, certainly throughout this pandemic and outside of the pandemic, that regional cooperation and integration is very important.
Yes.
When are we going to actually expedite this process and it go beyond us talking about regional integration and cooperation, and it really become that thing, regional integration and cooperation? And let me give you a more solid, for example, intra-regional flights, as a for example, that continues to be problematic for persons just being, and CSME, just being able to access basic things like that. So where are we along this path towards intra-regional integration and cooperation?
Well, we are very small in the global scale. The countries in this region are tiny. There would be the temptation by some to regard us as insignificant. But together, we have a much stronger voice. Together, we can shape issues to our benefit much more effectively. And together, we can harness the best of the region. That really has been the driving philosophy and vision behind the progress that has been made with respect to regional integration, regional cooperation. So let's start from the positive side, and we will look at the work to be done. I would say that there is good evidence of progress toward Caricom collaboration and integration. The region has together withstood a number of contemporary challenges. Let's look at the response to COVID-19, where one can justifiably say that there have been areas in which we could have mobilized better or differently. The fact of the matter is the Caricom's leadership was identified and mobilized very early on the issue of vaccine equity. That has stood the test of time and has now been accepted. This issue has now been accepted as a priority to the extent that tomorrow it will be addressed at the G7 summit. To the extent that large administrations like the United States, as well as the European Union and other power centers of the world, have been responding to this particular issue. The Caricom's voice has been clear and powerful and strong on the border disputes that have threatened the stability of our region, sometimes that have threatened the cohesiveness of our regional team. I can give you two examples: the border dispute between Venezuela and Guyana. And then there's another less heralded but also critical border dispute between Belize, which is a Caricom member state, and Guatemala, which is not. All of these matters have received dedicated attention by the current chair of Caricom, who is our prime minister, as well as all the other Caricom heads in detailed sessions where we examine the challenges, examine the options, and determine the best way forward as a collective. That unity has, those challenges have helped strengthen the bond among our heads of government. And I've been fortunate to be a witness, an active witness, a participant at several of our heads of government meetings chaired by Trinidad and Tobago, as well as caucus sessions where it's just the heads of government, the prime ministers, and a couple presidents, and plus one, which is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, in a closed session where some of the more frank dialogue has been engaged. So what I want to say is that Caricom and the spirit of regional integration is very much alive and well. You'd recognize that what is proving to be a very successful and critical progress with vaccine purchase through the African Medical Supplies Platform, that was a collective effort coordinated through the Caricom Secretariat, again under the chairmanship of Trinidad and Tobago. And we are poised to receive very advanced one-dose vaccines in
August,
significant quantity, and not just us, other member states that need vaccines urgently. It's not just Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay,
Suriname
so Caricom is also other Caricom nations are
deficit.
going to be benefiting from that negotiation.
Yes, this is a regional effort. Guyana will benefit, Jamaica, and there are other countries. Some of the smaller islands, and I could go into hours of dialogue on this one. Some of the other islands are in a unique position where they have received sufficient donations to address the low-hanging fruit, the healthcare providers, some of the elderly, and those in the general population who wish to be vaccinated. But unfortunately, some of these islands have very high levels of vaccine hesitancy. So they may be less inclined to make wider purchases of vaccines at this time. But certainly the member states that I just mentioned are very much pursuing the AMSP option through Caricom. So that's another example of where Caricom has shown its current value. The La Soufrière disaster, the La Soufrière volcano, which didn't affect just one member state, but two. And Barbados in some ways can be viewed as even more affected than some parts of
it was
St.
very
Vincent.
difficult in Barbados.
So it's challenging. Again, Caricom rose to the occasion via SEDIMA, via the work of the Caricom Secretariat, via the work of the chairman of Caricom, in ensuring that even within this region, before we reach out anywhere else, the best resources were strategically mobilized and availed to our brothers and sisters. So if there's anyone standing up today heralding the current role and relevance and value of Caricom, it should be all of us, but certainly the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines would be at the forefront. And you would recognize they were some of the first to offer their excess vaccines to Trinidad and Tobago.
They were.
And
yes,
you mentioned
they were.
Sputnik earlier. For whatever reason, they are fans of the Sputnik there. That has redounded to us in
getting
TNT,
the AstraZeneca.
being able to reach out to them, to hold their hand and say, well, listen, we can assist in ensuring that your generosity will be well utilized and we will not waste a single vial of those vaccines.
Landing tax and the CSME passport. Those are the two things that would have me greatly concerned. I've heard recently that Gaston Browne, who is likely to be, he's up next to be the next Caricom head,
it's
right?
Rotational.
Right, because it's a 6-month rotational thing. Gaston Browne is saying that, Prime Minister Gaston Browne is saying that he wants to make this whole issue of the landing tax policy. Now, I know that you've been in this position as Minister of Foreign and Caricom Affairs, this August, September of last year into now? Right. So it's not
I
even
call it a year.
Well, you're calling it a year? Okay. Well, okay. So you're there about a year, right? Give or take, you're there about a year. Has there been any conversation at all? I mean, prior to Prime Minister Browne indicating that he wants to make an issue landing taxes. Have we started talking about landing taxes and the way in which we can address landing taxes to make movement between the islands and a smoother, less expensive thing?
Absolutely. Those conversations are ongoing. At the last intersessional heads of government meeting, there was detailed examination of what is being regarded as a joint tourism policy that by necessity includes a heavy emphasis on travel within the region, facilitation of ease of travel within the region, because part of what we can offer to the world is not just one discrete destination, but an amalgam of attractions. So if you enter the Caribbean region as a tourist, as a visitor, you should be able to move very freely. As well, our own citizens of Caricom, should be able to move much more freely with an ease of exchange between one island and the other. There are real barriers to this being achieved overnight, but the heads of government have endorsed the framework for this joint tourism policy, and at our next heads meeting, which will be in July, chaired in that case by the incoming chairman, I anticipate some further work would be done on some of these key issues. But it goes much broader than that. It goes to the single market and the economy. It goes to
because I was going to ask about that, an update on the CSME.
ICT space. Right. Very much active work in progress. And there's a subcommittee of Caricom that has been having regular meetings, identifying barriers, addressing those barriers. Trinidad and Tobago has made some progress in that regard. The next step for us is to move to a greater degree of digitization of our own application process, to ensure that individuals don't have to physically come into the ministry to apply for a Caricom skills certificate. That a lot of this work, it will be safer and also more responsible of us if we can ensure a more rapid, timely turnover, as well as to do more of this business virtually. We've been managing administratively to take care of a number of persons with skills who previously had challenges in moving into and out of Trinidad and Tobago to seek work or apply their services. We've been treating with that. But there are existing challenges. Okay. For example, with respect to visa-free movement within the region. I don't want to single out any particular member state, but when you put the Haitian scenario within the Caricom context, there have been some member states that have said, well, we cannot remove the existing barriers overnight because it can trigger a bit of a social challenge. So there are aspects of this integration, fulfillment of a single market and the economy that we are working on achieving at this stage, and there are some that are being deferred. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has prevented our leadership from meeting in the same room physically. And while we herald the benefits of working in the virtual space, with respect to diplomacy, there's a different level of value that accrues from a caucus meeting where you have your Mia
there's
Hartley,
face-to-face
Keith
interaction,
Rowley,
that sort of thing?
Yes,
Okay.
your President Ali, sitting face-to-face and being able to thrash out some of the barriers. I look forward to, I don't think it will be in July, but maybe the following heads meeting, that might be achievable, because some of the barriers can be dealt with that way as well.
That way? Okay. What what kind of benefits can we look forward to with respect to CSME?
Well, we, as the global economy has contracted to some degree, that for us, COVID-19 has certainly not helped. It's made things a lot worse. And therefore, individuals with skills can look forward to those skills being offered to a much wider market beyond Trinidad and Tobago. Our region is diverse, and there are opportunities that exist in other parts of Caricom that now, with freer movement and with acceptance of qualifications in a range of fields, our nationals are able to open an online newspaper from Jamaica or Georgetown and identify a vacancy or an opportunity that they actually can pursue. Whereas in the past, that would have been a Herculean challenge. So there's real value to this. There's also value in some of the achievements. I don't want this opportunity to pass without recognizing that under the chairmanship of Trinidad and Tobago, we have recruited the first female Secretary General of Caricom in the history of this organization. It's a shame that it has taken this long, but I want to say it's a point of pride, and this your humble servant was very much involved in the recruitment process in ensuring that we were able to herald this achievement, and that sends another message from Caricom to the global community that we recognize the value of female leadership, and it is my view that Dr. Barnett will bring a different menu of skills to that key role that will help this region significantly moving forward. That's another little celebration for Caricom.
Can you give us an update on our candidacies for a seat on the UN Secretary Council?
The presidency of the UN General Assembly.
Yes.
I don't know if that's what's being referred to.
That's it. Yes. That's it.
So Trinidad and Tobago has begun the soft diplomatic work using our overseas missions, using our permanent missions to the United Nations, using our contacts from in headquarters, there's a lot of, the crude word would be horse trading, but a lot of delicate diplomacy that builds up into a successful candidature, especially at that high level. So for some time now, we have been identifying opportunities to give support to candidatures of other countries at various bodies, whether it's at the ICC, the various other bodies, where we would offer support, but we would indicate that we would welcome in advance your support for what is regarded as a very important part of Trinidad and Tobago's footprint on the global stage, which would be the success of that future candidature for the presidency of the UN General Assembly. We've been successful in the recent past with a number of key candidatures, which is a reminder that Trinidad and Tobago is well engaged with the global community. We are well respected in other capitals, and our hardworking and stretched diplomats continue to serve this country and ensure that our nationals are well positioned in leadership situations across the world.
Final question for you. Are there any other diplomatic channels that we are pursuing right now for vaccine procurement?
Yes. I gave some suggestions of a few of those, looking toward Latin America. There are, Rhoda, if I were to list for you right now the number of meetings and conversations, most of which have not entered the public space, that Trinidad and Tobago has been engaged with, not from yesterday, from last year, and continuing. The volume is being turned up consistently. The challenge has been acknowledged. The challenge is we are a small market. Prior to this current period, we also had very low numbers, which unfortunately put us at a bit of a disadvantage in terms of receiving large contributions, but even with respect to being able to purchase, this country is very actively engaged. There have been a number of false flags and blank avenues, but that's the price you pay for pursuing all available leads. So in various capitals, I mentioned Argentina, there's Mexico, there's Canada, there's United Kingdom, there's the European Union, which is an active channel that we are pursuing. The Prime Minister has written to the President of Italy. There's Spain, active channels being pursued. There's France. We've already mentioned the African Union, which is governing the African Medical Supplies Platform. There's a lot of work going on. And guess what? It's not me alone. It's not Dr. Rowley alone. There's a team of persons. Dr. Rowley has recruited advocates abroad who have been helping Trinidad and Tobago in this regard. Some very high-profile individuals who have been carrying our flag, advocating for the access that we need. And there are people right here, some private sector persons, without cost, without request for favor, that have been partnering with me and my ministry in really pushing the envelope. Again, without request for favor or payment, but on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago. There are genuine patriots that every day have been exploring and identifying potential opportunities for us to achieve our public health goals. We've harvested some of the fruits of those efforts already. That has given a bit of a buffer while some of the purchases are being mobilized. There's an aggressive effort underway right now. When I say right now, I mean if I look through the last few calls on my phone, those efforts are underway to expedite the receipt of the African medical supplies vaccines, the Johnson & Johnson.
Move it up from August a little higher up?
To much higher up.
Those
up? Efforts are underway.
Okay.
And then the last one, I don't want it to
don't tell me that last one yet. Stick a pin with that last one, because there's something that popped into
vaccines.
It's on okay. What I was going to ask is on vaccines too, but go ahead.
A little secret I want to tell you. Some of the offers we have been getting. In fact, maybe I shouldn't tell the secret. But let's just say
no, you have to tell the secret now. You can't start and tell me I have a secret. I'm not going to tell you the secret. I'm going to tell you the secret. I'm not going to. I can't deal with that tension, Amery.
Let's just say the COVAX has not always been welcoming of bilateral exchanges of vaccines that have been purchased by countries through COVAX. And they've been indicating that if your state is unable to utilize those vaccines for whatever reason, you should return it to us for us to redistribute.
Right.
Part of diplomacy is working with other member states within that particular environment, some of that work is ongoing as we speak.
So here's a question I wanted to ask you, because it's so intriguing that you talk about COVAX and where the vaccines can go and not go. I've been hearing that Haiti doesn't have vaccines or hasn't had the opportunity to access vaccines. Is there a likelihood or a chance that if we've got vaccines, we can donate vaccines to Haiti?
Well, that's an excellent question. I'll answer it in two chapters. Chapter 1. Fortunately, the Biden administration, in addition to recognizing Caricom as a whole, with respect to this global vaccine initiative, has identified Haiti in particular. They're not benefiting from basically any vaccines at all, sad to say, at this stage, as a key priority recipient of their announcement. So that's really good news for Haiti, and that's something that we have supported in all of our interactions, very openly. The second chapter to the answer is, you would recall in our receipt of the various donations that we have already benefited from, and there have been quite a few of them. The Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, has been very clear in acknowledging the generosity of the countries that gave to us. But that has also set the tone for Trinidad and Tobago's philosophy on vaccine equity. That philosophy would not just lead to our benefit, but to the benefit of others. If our calculations and our acquisition goes as well as we anticipate, we will have a significant inflow of vaccines over the next few months. And I would say with great pride at that stage that Trinidad and Tobago is likely to emerge as a very generous member state of Caricom and part of the regional community in ensuring that we don't sit on any excess vaccines, that we ensure that the generosity that has been extended to us in our time of surge or a wave of infections, we would extend that to other countries. Because guess what? This infection, this pandemic is ongoing. It's not over for any country. It's not over. And therefore, the good deeds that are done will redound. As I said, we helped out with respect to La Soufrière. And very quickly, we were rewarded with generosity. We've benefited, and associate member state Bermuda, member state Grenada, member state St. Vincent and the Grenadines, other partners further afield. You'll recall that one of the first countries to send a donation to China, you know what country that was?
It was
Trinidad
us.
and Tobago.
We sent, what is it, masks?
There were no vaccines then, yes, and other PPE equipment. It was scoffed at by a few people back then because it's small quantities, but symbolically, that helped open certain channels and opened eyes that, listen, this is a country that's serious about its key relationships. And I can tell you that we have been harvesting some of the value of those positive interventions. That's the way it works. With respect to vaccines, this government is not and will not be in the business of hoarding or denying vaccines to those who need those vaccines.
Well, Dr. Browne, that's where we will wrap it up. I mean, I asked you for an hour of your time, and you've given me way more than that. You've given me 95 minutes of your time. So thank you so much.
I think it's a testament to your skill that the time has flown, Rhoda.
Oh, you're very kind.
It's been I view it as a productive exchange, because even in these conversations, even in some of the questions you've asked, I've attempted to answer all of them, but some of them have coming with the question has been a suggestion, an implied suggestion, or a sense of we need to put greater impetus on a particular area or avenue. So those signals are well received, and again, it goes back to what I see as the value of this kind of exchange being available to persons like yourself and your audience to have a dialogue. There are benefits both ways, and I hope your audience has extracted some
I think
benefit
so.
from our
I've been looking at the
conversation.
comments. They've been very active throughout and listening and having their own conversation with themselves, amongst themselves, I mean, about the responses you've been giving.
Okay.
So thank you
So,
so much.
to be continued then.
Yeah. I have to have you back. There are things that you raise here that I think down the line we're going to have conversations about. And you've always made yourself available to me. If it's just to give information when I needed information or to agree to do an interview like this. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Enjoy
Have a
the rest of
wonderful
your evening. Bye.
Good night to your fans as well.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye. So that was Senator Amery Browne, Senator Dr. Amery Browne, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Foreign and Caricom Affairs. I hope you all learned something. I know I certainly learned a lot, especially with respect to vaccine diplomacy within Trinidad and Tobago and the other countries, and of course where we're thinking of heading with respect to greater Caricom integration. So I will see you all on Friday. It has been a while that I sit down with all you and talk the things. So on Friday, we're going and sit down and talk the things. Have plenty thing to talk. Like for instance, all you know, Toppy gone on leave. Yeah, Toppy on leave. So we have things to talk. I will see you all